It is about 3 hours since Donald Trump met Benjamin Netanyahu at the entrance to the West Wing, just to the side of me here. They had a meeting at which they actually got the Qatari Prime Minister on the phone, and Benjamin Netanyahu was said to apologise to him for that strike that Israel launched onto Doha, they said, to try and hit Hamas leadership there. Donald Trump has outwardly been very angry about that strike. He wants there to be diplomatic ties between these countries, and there was a suggestion that perhaps there could be a move towards that. But then, as you say, this deal from the White House, they're calling it Trump's comprehensive plan to end the Gaza conflict. A lot of it is as expected, but there is some language in there that they'll be worried about, including the idea that an Israeli invasion would be suspended at this time rather than stopped completely. I think there are still quite big gaps between these sides, and therefore we should probably be quite cautious about this at this stage. Donald Trump sees himself as a peacemaker. But can he really help to solve this intractable conflict?
President Trump, are you confident, sir, there'll be peace in Gaza anytime soon?
Very confident, he said, ahead of Benjamin Netanyahu's fourth visit to the White House this year. Some think Trump is the only politician who can persuade the Israelis to stop scenes like these. Gazans hammering and digging, desperately trying to find victims after another strike, this one yesterday. An assault that has lasted almost 2 years since Hamas's October the 7th attack. Could this be about to change?
Thank you for joining the Sunday briefing.
Before entering the White House, Netanyahu struck an optimistic note on Fox News.
And I hope we can make it a go, because we want to free our hostages. We want to get rid of Hamas rule and have them disarmed, Gaza demilitarized, and a new future set up for Gazans and Israelis alike, and for the whole region.
So what of this latest peace plan? Reports over the weekend detailed 21 points presented by the Americans, including that the conflict would end immediately, with Israel halting all operations. All Israeli hostages, living and deceased, would be returned within hours. Hundreds of Palestinian detainees would also be freed. Gaza would be administered by a temporary transitional government under an international body. The Palestinian Authority would only have a role much further down the line. Hamas would not be involved in any future governance, but its leaders would be granted amnesty.
Will you agree to amnesty for Hamas?
Yeah, if they finish the war, release all the hostages, we let them out.
So some hope, but in Gaza, the sheer desperation goes on.
The situation here is very bad, and we're afraid that they'll storm and invade here. My sisters and I are appealing to leave to the south, but we need a paper to give us an ambulance to transport my children. We're sitting in a death trap here.
Yeah, I don't deal with optimism or pessimism.
And in Washington, D.C., Aaron David Miller, who has worked as a Middle East negotiator in Republican and Democratic administrations, brings a dose of reality.
We may be closer than ever, but my experience in Israeli-Palestinian negotiations, under relatively normal circumstances, not between Israel and Hamas, tells me that they will fight over every single period, every single comma, and getting from one phase to the other is going to be excruciatingly difficult and painful.
That Israel and Hamas are irreconcilable is a reality that has been on stark display in recent days. With this from Hamas on CNN.
Israel, I think that is a country of terrorism.
And this from Netanyahu at the UN General Assembly in New York.
The Palestinian authorities pays terrorists to slay Jews.
Which is why, even in this moment of hope, there are so many who fear that the horrors of this war will grind on into a third year, with more lives lost every day.
Well, let's go back now to the White House press conference with President Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It's still going on. Mr. Trump has declared we are beyond close to a ceasefire deal in Gaza and thanked Mr. Netanyahu for agreeing to his plan. that the White House published a short time ago. Let's get more from Anushka, who's outside the White House again. Anushka.
And as you say, there has been some really positive words inside that press conference. President Trump came out just after the White House had published some more details, including this idea that the Gaza Strip would be led by a kind of international body that would be called the Board of Peace. And guess who is going to be the chair of it? Donald Trump himself. He says he didn't want to do it. He was asked to do it, but that's what he has agreed to do. Also with other international figures, including the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, obviously, as he's had a meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu and spoken to the Qatari Prime Minister during that. There are some players who have agreed to this. Let's listen to what the president said.
At least we're at a minimum very, very close, and I think we're beyond very close. And I want to thank Bibi for really getting in there and doing a job. We've worked well together, as we have with many other countries, both of us, with many other countries, which is the only way this whole situation gets solved. And I'm not just talking about Gaza. Gaza is one thing, but we're talking about much beyond Gaza. The whole deal, everything getting solved. It's called peace in the Middle East.
And so, look, this does sound like positive movement. It would involve the Israeli invasion at least being suspended and then moving towards a gradual withdrawal. It would also involve the return of the hostages, although, of course, we have yet to get a response from Hamas to all of this. But here is my caution on this. These two sides are very far apart. You heard I spoke to a former negotiator earlier who said they will go through this line by line. There are plenty of potential sticking points, including the fact that there is no role for the Palestinian Authority for some time and then with an undefined timeline. We knew that some of the Arab countries did want a role for the PA, but Netanyahu has been very critical of them as a corrupt organisation. So look, this is positive, but there is still a long way to go if this is actually going to lead to a peace deal in the end.
Thanks, Anushka. Well, joining me here in Liverpool is the former Israeli negotiator and fierce Netanyahu critic, Daniel Levy. Does this look remotely credible as a plan?
I wish I could say yes, because we're desperate to see this end. I can't say yes because it isn't. It doesn't have the things that you would need to implement to get a ceasefire, let alone get all the other high-sounding goals that the president seems to be setting out. This is more of the same thin, weak soup unseriousness that we've seen from this administration. How's it working out for you on Russia-Ukraine, I would say?
I mean, he's saying the Arab countries now need to get Hamas to agree to this. He's even saying Iran could sign the Abraham Accords.
Right, so Trump has appointed himself head of this board that will oversee the peace construction. Bad news, Tony Blair got a demotion. He's just going to be a member of the board, unlike the earlier speculation. But let's be serious for a moment. What you have is not really what's been missing the last 2 years, Krishnan. You have an Israeli-American agreement. A proposal was put forward last week after Trump met the 8 leaders of Arab and Muslim-majority states. That proposal was then responded to by those states. All the things those states said they needed to move forward have been dismissed. None of them appear. I've seen them. None of them appear in this document. What's more, the document has been further watered down. So even the gesture of referencing Palestinian statehood, which was in the document, has apparently been taken out. And guess what? The Palestinians haven't been asked. How we get from here to an actual ceasefire seems just as long a route as it was this morning.
Yes, I mean, the idea of getting the Palestinian Authority and Hamas and any other player to sign up to Donald Trump and Tony Blair running Gaza is quite a stretch.
I don't know if even the word quite a stretch goes that far, but look, seriously, this is not how you end genocidal wars. We're here at Labour Party conference, Christian, and they just voted to acknowledge that genocide and call for sanctions. That's where the sentiment of the party and I think the broader public is at. It needs serious diplomacy. It's not what the Trump administration is providing.
I mean, why would Netanyahu sign up to this? I mean, given the argument has been for quite some time, he wants perpetual war, he wants total victory, which this falls a little short of.
So 2 things here. First of all, I think he can say yes, quite confident in the knowledge that this isn't something that's going to be implemented. He can then say, no, Mr. President, we agreed, we can't walk this stuff back. if he were to actually get these things without, let's be serious, this isn't a recipe for ending the war. He will restart the war if these are the terms. So he has no real problem with this. I'm sure he will get criticism at home. That will be helpful for him. He can say to Mr. Trump, look, I've really worked hard to do this. But that does not constitute a plan for ending this.
The press conference is still going on. Mr. Trump is still speaking. Anushka is outside the White House again. Anushka.
Yeah, that's right. They are still outlining this plan that the White House has put forward. It is worth saying that we had reports about what this plan was going to look like over the weekend, and there were some changes to some of the language, including around Israel's withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. I noticed that the language in what the White House has put out today is not talking about an immediate withdrawal, but is talking about a suspension, about freezing the lines as they are at the moment, and then moving towards a withdrawal once the hostages have been returned. Of course, Netanyahu has agreed to this. He sounded very positive earlier today. That's why he's here. That's why he's speaking beside Donald Trump, although we haven't heard detail from him about what he thinks. But he's already been criticised by his cabinet back home in Israel because of some of the theatrics of today, including the fact that he apologised to the Prime Minister of Qatar. Some pretty stark warnings around that from some to the right of him in his cabinet. And remember, the Israeli cabinet would need to agree to this, but so would Hamas, so would people representing Gaza, and at the moment there are clearly things in there that could be very difficult in terms of sticking points. There is no role for Hamas in any future governance. Now, that would be expected. Most of the international community has agreed that that's what they would want to move towards, but also no immediate role for the Palestinian Authority. That is something that would come further into the future. So while clearly it sounds very positive that the White House has put this out at the moment, we're going to have to go through it line by line.
You talk about the Palestinian Authority there, but what about Hamas? Is there any chance they would agree to it? Do we even know if they've seen it in its entirety?
Well, the impression we're getting at the moment is that, no, we are not yet at a stage where they have shared this with Hamas with a response. And it is worth pointing out that when you've listened to the Hamas leadership in recent days, we've heard from them on CNN over the weekend, that they are very, very negative about Israel, in the same way that the Israelis have been unbelievably negative about them and want them to have no role. The one thing that perhaps could be of interest to them is that Netanyahu has been talking about being relaxed about the idea that they would get amnesty. The leaders of Hamas would get amnesty if they agreed to this. But as you say, they'd be essentially voting for a future in which they had no role whatsoever, because that is an absolute red line for the Israelis. You know, this former negotiator I was speaking to earlier said in 2000, it was the closest he felt that they came to the two sides coming together. That was when he was involved in those negotiations between the two sides in this. And he said then there was a Grand Canyon between the two sides. And he said that gap has only widened since then. So look, there are clearly positive things here. The possibility of the Israeli invasion ending, but so much detail yet to go through and no idea yet what the other side thinks.